There are nights you wake up at 3 a.m., not because of noise, not because of a nightmare, but because something inside you is whispering, it's time. You lie there, in the darkness of your room, staring at the ceiling as if waiting for an answer from somewhere else. Everything family, work, meetings, retirement plans, suddenly no longer feels as right as it once did. Even though nothing is technically wrong, deep down, you know, you are no longer the woman you were yesterday. No one told you that the awakening doesn't begin with light. It begins with a fracture. No one told you that there would be days when you'd find yourself crying in a grocery store parking lot for no reason, or feeling lonely in the middle of your own birthday party. No one told you that the soul doesn't knock with prophecy, but with a strange disorientation, standing in the kitchen, holding a cup of coffee, suddenly unable to remember why you walked in. Carl Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. There is no journey back to yourself without walking through the cracks." This video isn't here to teach you how to heal quickly. It's a map for women like you, who've wandered far enough from themselves and are quietly finding their way home. You may not have a name for this feeling, but you know, something deeper, truer, is shifting inside you. If you've ever felt like you no longer belong in the home that was once your dream, if you've ever sat in your car, engine off, and felt no desire to walk into that office one more time, if you've ever asked yourself, who am I when I'm no longer performing a role, then this is not a crisis. This is a beginning. Welcome back to yourself. Together, we'll walk through 9 signs, not to change you, but to help you remember what you've always known, just momentarily forgotten. It often doesn't begin with a major event. No accident, no loss, no explosive argument over dinner. Instead, it begins with very small things. One autumn morning, you wake up and realize you don't want to make coffee like you usually do. Not because you've changed your taste, but because you simply don't feel the need. There's something about that familiar aroma, the sound of the coffee machine dripping, the pale light filtering through the curtains, as if all of it belongs to another life, one you no longer feel you're living in. You go to work, sit down at your desk, like always, stare at the computer screen, move the mouse, reply to emails, but your mind is quietly wandering. You no longer feel excited about meetings. You no longer want to plan for next month. You no longer want to keep trying. There's nothing specific you can name, just a tiny fracture, as thin as a line on your wrist, appearing in the mirror of a life you once thought was stable. And then, on another day, you find yourself crying while watching an old movie, not because the film was too emotional, but because it stirred a longing you couldn't put into words, a sense of something familiar you once felt when you were 17. Before life taught you to be strong, to take care of yourself, to grow up, Carl Jung called those moments the cracking open, the silent shattering, when the outer shell can no longer contain what's within. And what's inside is the soul. No one prepares you for this phase. No one tells you that the rising of the soul might begin with simply no longer wanting to wear red, or no longer needing to win an argument, or looking at your packed calendar and thinking, do any of these things still matter? The first crack doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to set you free. But before you realize that, it may feel like you're drifting. No clear goal, no specific motivation, no rational explanation you can give others. They'll ask you, what's going on with you lately? And you'll smile, saying you're just a bit tired, just need a little rest. But deep down, you know this isn't just exhaustion. In Jungian psychology, there is a concept called the birth of new consciousness. It happens when the ego begins to lose its grip, and deeper parts of the psyche, what Jung called the self, begin to speak. The self doesn't shout. The self whispers in the wind, brushing past your car window as you drive alone down I-70. In the fleeting gaze of a stranger at the grocery store that leaves your heart aching for no reason. In the heavy silence when you realize you no longer want to return to the house you've lived in for 20 years. Many people call this a midlife crisis, but it's not. It's a doorway. And if you're brave enough, you will walk through, not to become someone new, but to return to who you've always been. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And sometimes, the first darkness you must bring into the light is the pretense that everything is fine. If you're going through this, the alienation from what once felt familiar, the vague dissatisfaction, the yearning for something deeper that has no name, know that you are not alone. You are not regressing. You are shedding, like trees shedding leaves in preparation for a new season, like a cocoon cracking open, so the butterfly can emerge, like an old house trembling just a little, before you step out of it for the last time. In the next part, we'll walk deeper into one of the first shadows of this journey, the emergence of the shadow, the forgotten part of you, but one that has never left you. But before we move forward, pause for a moment. Take a deep breath. Look around. You are no longer the woman you were yesterday. And this is not an ending. It's an invitation. A new journey has just begun. One day, you suddenly find yourself angry, not over anything big, just because of a damp towel left in the wrong spot in the kitchen, an unanswered message, a reminder from your husband that somehow felt controlling. You're startled. That kind of irritation isn't like you. You've always been the calm one, the peacemaker, the one who keeps things smooth and steady. Maybe you're just tired. Maybe it's your hormones shifting. Or maybe, just maybe, there's a part of you that's been hidden for far too long. And now, it no longer wants to be silent. Carl Jung called that part the shadow, not the evil part, but the unacknowledged one. It's the cry of the little girl inside you, when she was told to be good, to be sweet, to make the grown-ups happy. It's the quiet rage of the 20-something woman, when she gave up her passion to choose a stable job. It's the jealousy you never admit, each time you see someone living freely, daring to let go. It's the dream you smothered because you thought it's too late to start over. The shadow doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to be seen. Jung believed that the danger doesn't lie in the content of the shadow. It lies in denying it. The more it's rejected, the more it rises at the most unexpected times. A sudden outburst, a hurtful comment to someone you love, a nameless sadness creeping in during a quiet afternoon. Have you ever asked yourself, why did I react that way? That's not like me. But the truth is, it is you. It's the part of you you've tried to bury. And then the shadow starts appearing in your dreams. You find yourself being chased. You see a woman dressed in black staring at you from across the street. You see yourself sobbing uncontrollably, alone, where no one can see you. The shadow, in the world of the unconscious, often shows up in images, symbols, and feelings. It doesn't speak, but you feel it. A restlessness, a call, a tremor inside. When a woman, aged 45 to 54, enters this deep spiritual shift, the shadow is no longer something she can avoid. It becomes the threshold. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." So, how do you face your shadow without being consumed? You don't need to fight it. You only need to sit with it. Sit with your anger and ask, what are you afraid of? Sit with your jealousy and ask, what have you always wanted, but were never allowed to have? Sit with that inner voice that criticizes you and ask, who planted this voice in me? And when a woman once told me she didn't understand why she always felt uneasy whenever her daughter expressed her freedom. Not because she disliked her daughter. She loved her deeply. But somewhere inside, she felt a sting each time her daughter wore something bold, quit a job on a whim, loved fiercely, and let go with intuition. After months of journaling and inner work, she realized the shadow within her was the younger woman who had never lived for herself, the one who gave up her dream of studying dance, the one who married someone practical instead of the man she loved, the one who smiled through insults because she was taught that a woman must endure. And now, watching her daughter live what she had once buried, the shadow was rising not to blame, but to be embraced. Facing the shadow is not easy. There will be tears, there will be confusion, there will be guilt as you begin to admit the parts of yourself you once rejected. But if you're brave enough to do it, you'll start to see true light, not the false light of always staying positive, but a light that radiates from within. After you've looked straight at everything you once tried to bury, one of the healing methods Carl Jung recommended is called active imagination. You can sit quietly, close your eyes, and imagine sitting across from another version of yourself, one with a sorrowful face, angry eyes, or dressed in something unusual. You don't push her away. You don't ask her to be quiet. You simply say, "I see you. I'm sorry I abandoned you for so long." And you listen. The shadow does not demand perfection. It only asks for your honesty. And in that journey of honesty, you'll begin to feel a subtle shift, a lightness, a deeper breath, a morning where you wake up and no longer feel lost. You've entered the first stage of inner integration. You're no longer split between who you're supposed to be and the parts labeled as unacceptable. You become whole. In the next part, we will step into one of the hardest phases when the ego begins to dissolve. You no longer know who you are. You feel like all the definitions that once made you have disappeared. But it is in that very unraveling that the soul finally begins to speak. Are you ready to move forward? The shadow has been seen. Now it's time for the ego to let go. At first, it's just a few quiet pauses in conversations. You're still there, in the familiar kitchen, with old friends, with loved ones, but you no longer feel like you're in it. People talk about everyday things, the weather, weekend sales, the kids, meals, vacations that have been planned since spring. You nod, smile politely, hold your teacup, but inside is an emptiness, a silent space no one can see. You can't explain why. You only know that what once made you feel like you belonged now feels like a coat that no longer fits. Carl Jung called this the stage of withdrawing from the collective, not because you've become arrogant, not because you think you're above anyone else, but because your soul is turning inward. The relationships built on roles, on duty, on shared history start to blur. You're no longer the one who always shows up, no longer the easygoing one, no longer the big sister, the good friend, or the devoted wife. You are stepping out of the role. Silence slowly becomes your companion. You find yourself speaking less, listening more, and sometimes choosing not to show up at all. Others may see this as distance. They may say, "You're not the same." You may hear things like, "You've been so distant lately. You've changed. You used to be so much fun." And even though you still love them, still cherish those connections, you know you can't go back, not because you don't want to, but because you're no longer that version of you. Loneliness seeps into moments, but it doesn't feel like sadness. It feels like standing in a sealed room where, finally, you can hear your own soul. You realize you've spent so long living in the noise of expectations, the noise of trying to please everyone, the noise of advice, standards, and how you should be. And when the noise fades, you hear a quiet whisper within. I'm still here, sacred silence, the stillness the soul needs to be reborn. No spotlight, no applause, no validation from anyone outside. Just you with yourself. You may find yourself slowing down, less interested in social media, no longer needing to show off anything, no longer needing to debate or prove a point. Instead, you tidy your space. You organize old photographs. You spend more time in the garden. You write a few lines in your journal and tuck it away. You take slow walks alone in the evening light. No podcasts, no music, just the sound of wind. Some might call it low energy. Some might think you're withdrawing. But deep inside, you know, you are blooming in a way that doesn't show on the surface. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And sometimes, for that to happen, you must lose everyone who ever thought they knew you. This is not isolation. This is a sacred retreat, a holy rite every soul undergoes before a new incarnation appears, like the teacher retreating into a forest monastery, like the nun entering the quiet of a chapel, like the autumn sky folding into itself just before the first snow falls. No one sees it. No one understands, but you do. Try creating sacred space for yourself, a corner of the home with only a candle and a notebook, a rocking chair on the porch at sunset, a Sunday morning without an alarm clock. Don't try to fill every quiet space. Let them breathe, because in that stillness, you may just meet the part of yourself you once lost. In the next part, we'll go deeper into the world of symbols and dreams, where the unconscious begins sending clearer signals, recurring images, strange dreams, numbers, animals, or sounds you can't explain, yet feel undeniably meaningful. When the outer world stops whispering, the inner world begins to sing. If right now you feel different, distant, or even invisible, remember this: you're not disappearing. You're being reshaped in the sacred silence that only returning souls can hear. There are nights you wake up from a dream, heart racing, palms damp with sweat. You don't quite remember what happened. Only a hazy image remains. A door you couldn't open, a cracked mirror, a foggy road where someone was waiting, but their face was unclear. You glance at the clock. 3:02 a.m. Outside the window, the city is still asleep, but inside you, something is moving, slow, silent, inexplicable. Carl Jung called dreams the royal road to the unconscious. There is no more refined language to describe how our soul, when it's free from logic, duty, or social roles, begins to speak its truth. When the ego sleeps, the self begins to tell stories. Have you noticed, when you wake from a powerful dream, the emotions often linger, even if the details fade? A dream where you're being chased by a stranger in the woods, or sitting alone in an abandoned church, or flying high in the sky, only to fall into weightlessness. It all may seem irrational, but the feelings they leave behind are breathtakingly real. In Jungian psychology, symbols and dreams are not random. They are the soul's deepest language. A house may represent your own mind. A child may symbolize the innocent part of you, long neglected. A bridge is transition. A snake is transformation, frightening, but necessary. A mysterious woman in your dream may actually be you, braver, rawer, more primal. One woman shared that for 3 months straight. She dreamed of standing before an old wooden cabinet she could never open. She tried keys. She pushed and pulled, but the door wouldn't budge. In the dream, she felt anger, helplessness, and shame. After weeks of dream journaling, she realized the cabinet represented memories she'd locked away for over 3 decades. The pain of betrayal when she was just 22, a story she had never told anyone, not even the husband who slept beside her every night. The dream didn't come randomly. It kept knocking, patiently, because it knew her soul was ready to open. Not every dream needs to be logically analyzed. Instead, treat them like poems, like abstract paintings, where the goal isn't to interpret correctly, but to feel honestly. A small practice. After each dream, ask yourself, what did I feel when I woke up? Were there any repeating symbols? Is there a part of me this dream might be trying to remind me of? Jung believed that in times of deep transformation, archetypes, primal symbols appear in dreams as guides. You may dream of a wise old person telling you something cryptic that you can't forget, a lost child needing to be picked up and held, a wild woman leading you into the forest, asking you to leave behind your phone, your heels, even your name. These figures are not other people. They are you, aspects of your soul preparing to return to you. Jung called this process individuation, the deep becoming of the true self, where you don't just become a better version of yourself, you become whole, and the unconscious, through dreams, symbols, and archetypes, is your first and most important teacher. As you move into the awakening journey, you also begin to notice symbols showing up in waking life. You keep seeing the number 11. 11. You notice butterflies on cars, in articles, then in dreams. You hear the same phrase, the same lyric again and again, from different places. This is the language of synchronicity, sacred alignment, not coincidence, but remembrance. This is when you stop living only through logic. You begin to live through sensitivity. You don't need every answer. You only need to listen deeply, feel deeply, believe in what can't be explained, but also can't be denied. If you can start a dream journal, you don't need to analyze it right away. Just record the time, the images, the feelings, the fragments, because sometimes, weeks or even months later, a symbol will finally reveal something your heart has long known, but didn't yet have the words to speak. In the next part, we'll enter one of the most challenging landscapes of this journey, when you no longer know who you are, when old relationships begin to dissolve, when you find yourself standing in a gray space, where loss and rebirth exist side by side. There is no map for that place, but your soul remembers the way no one ever told you that you would lose people you once deeply loved. Not because of a big argument, not because someone betrayed you, but simply because you no longer resonate. You begin to find it hard to talk, not because there's nothing to say, but because the things that truly matter can't be shared. You want to talk about that strange dream last night, about the ache you feel standing in a crowd, about the longing to find something that truly belongs. But you realize they can't hear you, or they don't want to. And slowly, silence replaces phone calls. Distance replaces hugs. You still love them. It's just that you can't go back. Carl Jung once said, "We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. We meet ourselves in the form of those we've loved, and in those we've had to let go." Every relationship, no matter how deep, carries a soul function to help you recognize yourself during a particular phase of your life. But when you begin to change, when your soul starts to awaken, your vibration shifts, and those who once harmonized with you now feel out of tune. You no longer laugh at the same jokes. You no longer enjoy small talk. You no longer want to play the role, the cheerful one, the agreeable one, the eternal listener. Instead, you feel tired. You crave stillness. You want to speak the truth, even if it's just, "I'm not okay." You want to be quiet without being asked, "Why so withdrawn?" And when you stop performing, every relationship built on that role begins to fall apart. One woman once told me she had been the glue of her family for 30 years. She hosted Christmas, mediated conflicts, took care of everyone. Yet no one really knew how she felt until she stopped. She no longer called every week, no longer organized everyone's birthdays, no longer said yes to every invitation. And the surprising part, they didn't check in. They just said, "You're acting strange lately. You're not the same anymore." And just like that, she was left out of future gatherings. That pain made her question herself. But over time, she realized she hadn't lost them. She had just begun to find herself. Shedding old skins isn't about consciously ending relationships. It's about no longer pretending. And when you stop trying to hold everything together at any cost, what's not real naturally falls away. Carl Jung believed that letting go of outdated relationships is an essential part of individuation, the process of becoming your true self. Friendships built on polite agreement, romantic ties rooted in fear of being alone, social roles crafted just to appear okay. All of these will begin to crack and fall, like golden leaves at the end of autumn, not because you failed, but because your season is changing. You may feel incredibly empty during this phase. Sometimes, you'll want to text an old friend just to keep a familiar feeling alive. Sometimes, you'll cry over a conversation that ended in silence, without goodbye. But know this, it's not a loss. It's a sacred transition. You are not abandoning love. You are letting go of complicity with what is no longer true. There is a higher form of love, to love and let someone go. When they no longer align with your path, no blame, no bitterness, just two souls who have completed their lesson together, and you move forward. A gentle practice for this stage is to write a letting go letter. You don't have to send it, just write it. Write to the old friend you no longer see, to the former partner you once thought you'd grow old with, to the family member with whom connection now feels impossible. Write from the heart, not to blame, but to say, "I'm grateful for what we shared, and now I release it so I can return to myself." That is the gift you give yourself, honesty, and the courage to walk alone when you must. In the next part, we'll explore the sacred frame of life, when everything you've lived through stops feeling like disconnected fragments and begins to reveal itself as a mythic journey, a soul path woven with symbols, losses, and rebirth. You'll begin to see your life was never just a series of events. It is a secret map written long before you even realized you were alive. Have you ever had the feeling that you've lived through this before, even though you couldn't explain why? A relationship that felt strangely familiar from the very beginning. A loss that pierced so deeply you couldn't understand why it hurt that much. A turning point in life where you just knew by intuition that nothing would ever be the same again. That's not coincidence. That is soul memory. Some part of you remembers that this life is not just a string of random events, but a journey written in symbols, challenges, transformation, and return. Carl Jung called it the mythic life. He believed that beneath every ordinary experience, our soul is quietly living out an ancient script, where each of us is the main character in a personal legend. And you, the woman walking through fracture, loneliness, strange dreams, and unspoken losses, you are not simply going through change. You are becoming the protagonist of your sacred story. You are walking a path retold through many cultures. The calling, the silent urge you can no longer ignore. The descent, the fall into darkness, where identity dissolves and direction fades. The ordeal, the trial that pushes you to the edge physically, emotionally, spiritually. The revelation, when you hear a truth that you were never still enough to hear before. The return, you re-enter the old world, carrying a soul that has been tempered. You don't need to believe in gods. You don't need to study Greek epics or ancient scriptures. You only need to pause and ask, What is all of this trying to say to me? The betrayal that shattered you may have been the ritual of awakening. The lingering illness may have been the body's call to be remembered. The financial collapse may have been life's way of making you release what no longer serves your soul. The death of a loved one may have been the doorway between worlds. You start to see meaning in places you once thought were random. A sticky note falling from an old book with the one message you needed. A white owl flying past your window the night before. A major letting go. A child you don't know locking eyes with you in a cafe and smiling as if they remembered something you forgot. In the mythic life, nothing is small, everything is a symbol. A broken mirror might be an invitation to see yourself without the mask. A bridge you cross daily might reflect the transition your soul is in. A painting you've always been drawn to might be a message from your soul, from another lifetime. When you begin living as if you are in the middle of a sacred story, every decision deepens. You stop asking, "Is this logical?" and start asking, "Is this true to my soul?" You no longer try to get it right. You begin to choose what is real, even if it means losing approval, even if the path is quiet and no one claps. A woman once told me, every time she experienced overwhelming grief, she would return to the same old fairy tale her mother once read to her. A girl banished to the bottom of a deep well, who found the light in her own heart while trapped in the dark. She never knew why that story always made her cry. But now, in her 50s, she sees it. That girl was her, not literally, but spiritually. You can begin to write your own epic, not like a daily journal, but as the sacred tale of an ancient soul marked by symbols, trials, and soul milestones. For example, instead of writing, "I quit my job," write, "The warrior woman left the fortress to begin her journey into the deep forest." Instead of, "I was hurt in my marriage," write, "She touched the fracture in her heart and heard the voices of past lifetimes echo through it." Your life is not small. It's only been taught to appear small. In the stillness, after the old skin has been shed, after the old people have gone, after the ego has cracked, you begin to hear the real story of your life. And that's when you realize you are not a woman fumbling to find herself. You are a storyteller, remembering her own legend. In the next part, we will go even deeper into the realm where intuition expands, symbols become a language, and dreams begin to merge with waking life. Dreams are no longer separate from reality. They become a parallel realm where the soul teaches you truths that the daytime mind could never grasp. There are mornings when you wake up with a strange feeling. The room is the same. Sunlight still shines through the window as usual, but you no longer feel like the person you were yesterday. Not because of something that happened in the waking world, but because last night, a dream took you somewhere else. You dreamed you were standing in a forest, but you weren't afraid. You met a woman in a white cloak. She didn't speak, but her eyes brought you to tears. You dreamed of a room full of light where you felt you belonged, even though you had never seen it before. And when you woke up, you couldn't explain anything, but you knew, in a language beyond the brain, that something had just been delivered. Carl Jung called dreams the sacred language of the soul, not logical, not linear, not clear, but more real than anything else. In dreams, the ego steps back, the soul steps forward, not with words, but with symbols. Jung believed that during times of deep transformation, like when you are reshaping your identity in your 40s, 50s, or beyond, the unconscious activates a powerful messaging system through dreams. You may begin to have recurring dreams. You may see yourself die in a dream, but not feel afraid. You may encounter a child, an animal, a bridge, a dark body of water. All of it has meaning. not meaning in the dictionary sense, but a coded message meant only for you. One woman shared this with me. Every time she was about to make a wrong decision, like accepting a job that didn't align with her truth, or returning to an old relationship, she would dream of a car speeding downhill with no steering wheel. Only after the fourth time that dream came back did she stop and ask herself, what in my life is spinning out of control? Dreams don't tell you what to do, but they invite you to look more deeply. When dreams become your guide, nighttime is no longer just for sleep. You begin to listen to the night like a secret classroom where only you and your soul are present. To make dreams your companion, place a journal by your bed. Write down your dream as soon as you wake up, even if it's just a word, an image, a feeling. Don't wait until later in the morning, because dreams vanish like mist. Ask a question before you sleep. For example, is there something my soul wants to tell me tonight? You'll be surprised by how dreams respond, not with words, but with experience. Don't analyze too quickly. Live with the dream for a few days. Feel it. Let it sink into your waking awareness, sometimes only later, through a sentence, a glance, or a symbol. Will you finally understand? Jung believed that dreams are where archetypes, the ancient inner patterns, come to visit. You may meet the teacher, an old man, an elder woman, or a stranger who speaks words that bring you to tears. The child, your forgotten innocence. The dark mother, your shadow, not to be feared, just to be held. The door, the bridge, or the ladder, symbols of transformation. You may also dream of yourself in the future, a calmer version, a more peaceful one, reading on a porch, talking to someone you haven't yet met, living a life that doesn't resemble anything you've planned. And you wake up, not with fear, but with a longing you cannot name. That's when you stop being entertained by dreams. You begin to be taught by them. When you start to live in two worlds, the waking world and the dreaming one, you will notice that the wall between them begins to blur. A sentence from a dream can become a real-life decision. A feeling born in sleep can lead to an act of depth your mind cannot reason. A recurring symbol over several nights can unlock a wound that has lasted 20 years. Dreams are never meaningless. They are letters from the soul, sealed in symbol and emotion. And you, the one learning how to live more fully, can begin a dialogue with your life, not only in the daylight, but in the deep hours of the night. In the next part, we will explore a subtle and courageous theme. When you begin to drift away from what is familiar and accept that loss is not an ending, but a necessary space for something new and true to arrive. This is not giving up. This is stepping through. You know you are changing, but you also know there are things you can no longer hold on to. And that fear, the fear of losing what once felt like everything, has made you hesitate. Again and again, you ask yourself, if I let go, what will I have left? If I leave this job, who will I be? If I stop trying to hold this relationship together, am I breaking the family? If I stop pleasing others, who will stay? Carl Jung once wrote, "There is no birth of consciousness without pain. No birth comes without the death of something old." And on this journey, you don't just lose what's on the outside. You also lose an old version of yourself. When you cross a threshold of the soul, when intuition grows louder than logic, when inner truth becomes more important than outer approval, something inevitable begins to happen. You start losing, but that is not failure. It is ritual. One woman shared that, after 24 years of marriage, she chose to leave, not because of betrayal, not because of abuse, but simply because she could no longer find herself in that home. She was afraid of losing everything: stability, family recognition, the image of being a good wife. But more than anything, She feared the loneliness of walking away. Then she said something I will never forget. Staying was also a form of losing myself. Each of us, at some point, will be placed in front of a question without words. Do you choose familiarity, or do you choose yourself? And that answer doesn't come from the mind. It comes from the silence that follows. Too many days of pretending to be fine. When you move deeply into the journey of rebirth, you might lose a job that once made you feel safe, an identity that once brought admiration, a group of friends you thought would last a lifetime, a home, a place, a touch that no longer feels right. But from those losses, something else begins to emerge: essence, truth, soul. Jung believed the ego resists all change. It craves certainty. It fears the void. It hates the uncontrollable. And so it clings with reason, with logic, with fear, even when what it clings to has already rotted. But the soul can only bloom when you dare to release. There will be nights you cry for someone no longer there. Mornings when you look at your closet and see nothing that feels like you. Days when you sit in your car outside your old office and think, I really can't go in anymore. And then you don't go in. You turn the car around and leave. Not because you know where you're going, but because you can no longer stay. Jung called this the shift from outer direction to inner guidance. You begin to use alignment with yourself as your compass, instead of approval from others. And that is terrifying, because it is lonely, because it has no guarantee, because it requires you to trust. When you have nothing in your hands, but in that emptiness, spiritual creativity begins. You start writing, not to share, but to hear yourself. You clean your room, your house, your kitchen, as if making space for someone new to arrive. You cut your hair. You buy a new blanket. You look at your reflection in the mirror. And for the first time, say nothing critical, just a quiet look of kindness. You no longer force yourself to become someone. You begin to return, slowly, gently, but truly. There will be moments you feel like you're losing everything. But if you look closely, you'll see what's falling away is just the shell. What remains is the core. And then one day, likely an ordinary day, with no warning, you'll wake up and no longer feel afraid. Not because everything is fixed, but because you've touched a piece that runs deeper than any guarantee the world can offer. A peace that comes from no longer pretending, no longer holding on, no longer needing to prove anything. In the final part, we will step into the arrival of the higher self, the deepest, most complete version of you, always present within, but only appearing after you have endured enough, lost enough, and surrendered enough. And when that happens, everything you once feared losing will seem like ashes outside a fire that has finally begun to burn from within. There is a very special moment in the journey of transformation. It doesn't arrive with a loud bang or some mystical sign. It comes like a breath, gentle, deep, and entirely yours. You are sitting alone, perhaps on the porch, beneath a tree in the park, or simply leaning against a train window, doing nothing, thinking of nothing in particular. And suddenly, you feel enough. No one to impress, nothing to prove, no one to please, just you and the deep presence of a self that has always been there, waiting for you, patient, quiet. Carl Jung called this the self, the sacred center of being, not the ego, not your roles, your accomplishments, or the parts you perform, but the unchanging core of the soul, where every part of you, light and shadow, pain and wisdom, is reconciled, and the miracle is that self has never left you. You simply had not been quiet enough to hear its voice. When the higher self begins to rise, things don't become perfect, but they begin to make sense. You might still cry, but now you are no longer afraid of your tears. You might still feel lost, but you no longer feel wrong, because now Even the feeling of being lost is part of the map. You are no longer in a rush. You begin to live with the calm of someone who knows they don't need to grasp everything. You say no to what isn't right, not out of anger, but from clarity. You choose what aligns with no need to explain. You say no without trembling. You say enough not because someone forced you to, but because something inside you has become clear. One woman once told me, "I don't know exactly who I am right now, but I know I am no longer the person I used to pretend to be in order to be loved." That is when the higher self speaks, not with words, but with the consistency between what you feel and what you do. Between your heart and your footsteps, you begin to accept paradoxes you once couldn't hold. You feel sadness and peace at the same time. You feel loss and fullness. You feel invisible and more deeply connected than ever. You feel small and yet a part of something vast, expansive, sacred. Jung called this the union of opposites, and it is the sign of spiritual maturity. You no longer live for the gaze of others. You begin to live as though each day is an act of consecration. You wash dishes with presence. You brush your hair as if touching a sacred body. You water plants and feel your heart softening, as if you too are being watered. The higher self does not come to take you out of life. It comes to show you how to live it fully. No running, no pretending, no avoiding the shadow. Just walking with light from within. You no longer ask, "What should I do to become myself?" Because now you simply listen and begin to remove the masks, remove the expectations that were never yours, remove the words others planted in you and you mistook for truth. Beneath all of it, you were always there. There is no more need to search, because you now realize you are what has been seeking all along. In the steps ahead, there will still be challenges, surprises, and new pain. But from now on, you will no longer walk as someone who is lost. You will walk as someone who knows. Every step is a ritual. Every moment is a return. And if someone asks you, "What did you find on your journey?" you may smile without rushing to answer. But inside your heart, a quiet voice will say, "I didn't find anything. I simply remembered who I am." If you have come this far with me, know this. Not everyone is ready to face their soul, but you have, and that alone is a quiet, glorious rising. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And if today you no longer feel the need to pretend, no longer feel the need to ask for permission to be yourself, then perhaps you are already very close to that privilege. If you've stayed until now, then perhaps you already know. This video is not really about Carl Jung, not entirely about dreams, or the shadow, or the higher self. It is about you, about a journey no one around you truly sees, and yet you keep walking it, day by day, in silence, in secrecy, and with a quiet courage that only awakening souls can understand. You didn't turn back, even though sometimes you deeply wanted to. You didn't pretend to smile, even though that would have been so much easier. You didn't chase ready-made answers, but chose instead to live with unanswered questions. And because of that, you have truly begun to come home. Not everyone makes it this far. Not everyone has the courage to unravel the ego, to let go of what was once familiar, to sit in the silence of the soul before it sings again. But you are here. You are still here, and that is sacred. When you no longer know who you are, when you lose everything you once thought mattered, when there is no applause, no anchor, no praise, close your eyes and whisper to your heart, "I am still returning." Even if no one sees, I am still returning, because every step you take, no matter how small, is opening a space of light that no one else but you can enter. If this video touched something in you, a distant memory, an unspoken dream, or simply a stillness you had long forgotten. Leave a comment with just one word, "I am returning." It is not just a way to affirm your own journey. It is also a way to send a signal to other women, those quietly walking through the dark and searching for a light from afar. Click like, share this video with someone you know who may need a gentle whisper. And if you haven't subscribed yet, press subscribe, not just to receive more content, but to have a place to return to. Whenever you feel lost, you are not alone. You have never been alone, and you never will be. We are returning, one by one soul at a time, in silence, in love, in wordless light,